And we are live. Cool. I feel like I started every one of these off by saying, and we are live. Cool. But thank you so much, all of y'all, for being on. I really enjoyed getting to chat with you guys before this started. And, before we get into any sort of introductions or anything of that sort, I just want to say how huge of a fan I am of all the work that you guys are doing. Zach and Krissia, I've seen your stuff on like social media, on Twitter and Facebook for a while. Sydney and Mimi, I just became social media friends with y'all. But like, hats off to all the great work that you guys are doing in Pennsylvania, and hats off to Zach and Krissia and all the great work they're doing. And I don't know what oomph means, by the way, but maybe that'll be another question too, because I see that word used a lot, and maybe that just shows my age. But yeah, this will be a great conversation, I think, on student activism. And I guess before we kick it off into the program itself, I just want to get quick introductions in. So the first person that I want to introduce is Sydney Halpern. Sydney is a founder of Enough Greater Philadelphia, a coalition of students in the Greater Philadelphia area who have worked together for the last several years advocating for gun violence prevention and encouraging political activism with a focus on youth civic engagement. Sydney and her co-leaders first took action in 2018 following the tragic Parkland High School shooting. Together, they organized in over 500 student walkouts from their high school to demand Congress take action to address the gun violence epidemic. Since then, Enough GP has continued working to make politics accessible to young people through town halls, student activism forums, voter registration drives, legislation, advocacy campaigns, social media outreach, community organizer trainings, and more. Through Sydney's work organizing for Democrats up and down the ballot in Pennsylvania, she understands the gravity of this moment and what's at stake this election. As a first-time voter, Sydney would not be prouder than to spend her 18th birthday in D.C. at the McConnell versus Justice rally, protesting for a just and equitable future for all. So thank you, Sydney, and we will definitely chat more about the McConnell versus Justice rally, because I am very curious about it, and I'm sure folks listening in either don't really know about it or don't know enough about it. So we'll definitely ask you about that. But thank you for being on.
Thank you for having me.
And then our next person is your sister, Mimi Halpern. She's a co-founder of Enough Greater Philadelphia and organizes with Pennsylvania Democrats. She's a first-time voter committed to engaging more young people across the country. She's additionally working to organize the McConnell versus Justice rally in D.C. on October 17th to demand no Supreme Court confirmation until inauguration. Thank you so much for being on, Mimi.
Thank you for having me.
And then next we have Zach Krakauer. I think I pronounced that right. And Zach is a freshman in the honors program at the Moody College of Communication at the University of Texas at Austin. Hook 'em horns. After working as a statewide data entry manager and former Congressman Beto O'Rourke's Senate bid, he started an organization at his high school focused squarely on first-time campaign engagement, student voter registration, and civic engagement. In 2019, Zach joined the Julie Oliver for Congress campaign in his home congressional district, Texas 25th, and works in the areas of field, finance, digital, and social. Thank you so much for being on, Zach.
Great to see you, Zoe.
And then last but not least, we have Krissia Palomo. She's a third-year college student currently working on obtaining her bachelor's degree in political science. She currently attends St. Edward's University in Austin, Texas, and works for the Travis County Democratic Party's coordinated campaign. She's also currently organizing the McConnell versus Justice rally taking place in D.C. later this month in hopes to send the message that young voters want no confirmation until inauguration. Thank you so much for being on, Krissia.
Thank you for having me.
So I guess the first question, you know what? The first question, what does OOMPH stand for? Anyone wants to get into that?
I yield my time.
It stands for one of my followers, but it's pretty much just like very generic, like a mutual follower.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, it's sort of used like as a filler word for anyone or anything. But yeah.
Okay, well now I know, and anytime I see that, I will know. But yeah, I guess the first thing I want to get into, and I guess this is something Sydney, Mimi, and Krissia can kind of chat about, the McConnell versus Justice rally. I could kick it off with Sydney. If you just want to talk more about the rally itself, when it will be, and what it'll look like, and what do you hope it'll lead to?
Yeah, so on October 17th, a Saturday at 2 p.m., young organizers from across the nation are gathering in front of the Supreme Court to demand no confirmation until inauguration of the president elected by the 2020 election. This year is very unique in the fact that we have millions of voters who have already voted, and that includes a large cohort of young people whose this is the first time they're voting. This is the first time they'll be able to make that stance in a presidential election. So we're kind of saying, like, this is our chance. We want our voice represented justly, because the person inaugurated is going to affect how our climate's going to look, social justice, and all of these other issues that are going to affect our lives in the generations to come after us.
Cool. Mimi, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, something I've been really trying to highlight with this is that young people make up an unprecedented section of the voting bloc this year in 2020. Millennials and Gen Z combined are bigger than baby boomers and Gen X, silent generation, et cetera, et cetera. So we have unprecedented political power in this upcoming election. And with the amount of young people who feel so jaded to politics, they wonder if they're bounced. This opportunity with the Supreme Court saying that we're not going to let them get away with breaking precedent in this way is, I think, a great opportunity to restore a lot of young people's faith in politics, and show them that their vote will matter, not just for the president, but for the courts as well.
Cool, thank you. And then Krissia, if you want to comment on the event as well.
They pretty much summed it up nearly perfectly, I would say. But yeah, it's pretty much organized by young activists like Mimi and Sydney and I, for young activists, because the Supreme Court nominee, this is going to affect us for way longer than it's going to affect anybody else, any of our parents. So it's really important for us to show up, and I think that what we're doing here is really meeting the moment.
And if you check us out on social media, you'll see that we've been rolling out our speakers these last 2 weeks, and we're including people like Deja Fox, young Kamala Harris staffer for when she ran for president, and Little Miss Flint, Mari, who is an environmental racism activist. So we have a diverse, amazing coalition of speakers who will also be talking about how these issues personally affect them at the event.
Cool. And if folks want to tune in, if they can't make it to DC and they want to tune in and watch, where would they do that?
So we'll be live streaming from all our social media platforms. And if you search us up, if you're on Facebook now, if you look up McConnell v. Justice Rally, our page will come up. And if you mark that you're going, hopefully you'll be updated then with the live stream. You can also check us out on Twitter at McJustice Rally.
Cool, thank you. So my next question, in politics and campaigns, I'm sure a lot of y'all have heard this, is the art of the personal story, right? And I'd love to know y'all's personal story. And I want to kick this one off with Zach. I remember on social media, I think when we first became Twitter friends, I'm like, who's this, I think at the time we were a high school senior, who's like super engaged in politics. He really seems to like Julie Oliver, and he's here in Texas. So I'd love to know, I guess, like I said, kicking off with Zach, your personal story of why you got into activism and I guess just politics in general.
Yeah, well, thank you again, Zoe, for having us. And I know we've missed each other to meet personally pre-pandemic. So so funny that we're meeting now for the first time over live stream. But anyway, I was born and raised in Austin. I love my city, and I love my family even more. I never want to leave. Personally, I'm a conservative Jew and liberal American. So like many others like me, and like some of us on this call, we have the feeling of need to stand up for those less fortunate. The tikkun olam mindset is pretty much repair the world, and it's always been instilled in me. That affects my decisions and my choices. And as someone of privilege, I want to contribute what I can to the betterment of others, and that just kind of so happens to be translated into electoralism and working for a better, more representative tomorrow.
Cool. Krissia, same question for you.
Yeah, so I actually, whenever I look back at my story, it's very reflective of the American dream that a lot of people talk about. My parents moved my brother and I here when I was 6 years old from El Salvador. I lived with my extended family in Arlington, Virginia. I think it's really now looking back at it, it's kind of symbolic that I was so close to the nation's capital and now I'm so involved in politics. And that was the first place that I was able to really call home whenever we moved here. So after that, it pretty much just building up from, you know, being an immigrant. I became the first in my family. I'm well on my way to become the first to graduate college. You know, if I can make it through the next 2 years, fingers crossed. And yeah, so that's growing up in kind of low income schools. That's whenever I really got my start in activism, is that I saw how the decisions that legislators were making directly impacted me and my classmates. So that's why I'm involved.
Cool, thank you. And then Sydney, what's your personal story?
Yeah, so I guess I touched on this, or you touched on this in my bio a little bit. But in 2018, following, you know, the tragic Parkland High School shooting, my friends, Mimi and I, kind of took action to organize our community to demand that Congress take gun violence seriously and start taking change. And through that, you know, I've always grown up in a very active Democratic family. You can see, like, on Facebook, like, a picture of me at, like, a gun control rally in, like, the 4th grade. But the reality was, like, we were in high school now, you know, Sandy Hook happened when we were in 4th grade. We're in high school now, and these mass shootings are still happening. You know, community gun violence is still happening. And this can't, you know, this is our normal, but we can't accept it as that. And we kind of came to this realization that if we want the changes to happen, we need to elect a gun sense majority, which means a Democratic majority. So that's kind of the transitioning over to activism, to kind of organizing and volunteering and working on campaigns.
Cool, thank you, Sydney. And then Mimi, same question as the previous three.
Yeah, growing up in the same house and same family as Sydney, we have a pretty similar story. Parents were always involved. It was sort of, I don't know, expected involved in our community and get involved in community service. Sydney mentioned specifically that first protest we went to when we were in 4th grade after Sandy Hook. I remember when the news of Sandy Hook came out, we were in a Scout meeting at our elementary school. And I remember that was like a really weirdly, like, shaken moment for me, because I was with my friends in our elementary school and we heard this atrocious story about these kids losing their lives in their school. And that was like this moment where I realized that, you know, these issues aren't, you know, so separate from us. It's not just news, it's real people. And I can have some change in that, and I can make my voice heard. And that, you know, it's heartbreaking, but at the same time, it's empowering to realize you can do something about it.
Yeah, I remember, I guess I'm going to date myself in my age, but I remember coming home from school. I forgot what grade I was in, but, you know, learning about Columbine. And then it feels like, and it's so sad, but we, you know, as a country, it's like it happens every year, right? I remember being at UT when Sandy Hook happened, and President Obama, you know, was you know, speaking to the nation, and he was crying, and it's like, you know, I don't know. At that moment, I'm like, maybe this is going to be it, right? Maybe this is the moment we stand up, you know, against all these gun lobbyists and all these, you know, folks who are responsible for the death of all these innocents. Because there were kids who had died in Sandy Hook, right? I know you guys were mentioning you were in 4th grade, and I think it was like 5, 6 year olds who died, right? And obviously, no one gave a damn, right? And then we had Parkland, and we've had a shooting outside of Houston and in Sutherland Springs, and you know, the list unfortunately goes on and on and on and on. And then you have stuff like the Pulse nightclub shooting, and just a lot of injustices outside of that, in terms of, you know, with this president, with our current president becoming president, everything that kind of came after that, with, you know, mosques and synagogues being targeted, you know, ICE raids on communities, just everything. So I'm not sure if this is going backwards or going forwards, but seeing all that, you know, like, how did that push you, I guess, is my question. You know, there's a level of activism that you already had, but like just seeing injustice after injustice after injustice, you know, has that moved you? Has that made you want to go, you know, that much harder, you know, towards, you know, a better world, a better America? You know, has that made you want to, you know, phone bank more and hit more, knock on more doors, or, run for office yourself, when you're older. How has all these events kind of shaped you guys going forward? And Zach, I'll kick it off with you.
Oh, it absolutely is 99.9% a feeling of need to do something. We were able to. We are young people with energy and cars that can drive to rural Texas to go knock on doors. So it's absolutely just a feeling of, if not me, who? Like, who else is going to speak to the high school, first time voters? Not someone in their 50s is able to get them registered, to get them out to vote. So we're able to take our perspective as young people and apply it for good. So that's really where it's at.
Cool. Krissia?
Yeah, so I would say the same thing. It's like this sense of urgency because, every day, and I'm sure that everybody here can relate, every day it's something new. It's something new that's happening. It's something that causes a lot of sadness in me, but that sadness turns into motivation to do better. So, that's kind of, yeah, it's like you see the news every day and you think, okay, well, if not me, who? So you step up and you do the work.
And then Sydney.
Yeah, I mean, what Chrissy and Zach said is both, very well said and 100% agree. And I think it's that, like, you carry that, like, pain and passion, like, with you, and you use that to push you forward. Like, I think about the conversations I've had with voters who, like, don't know where their next meal's coming from, or worry about, like, when someone tells you they're worried about their son and gun violence, or they tell you that they don't know how to keep their, like, small store open, you know what I mean? Like, even if you're just a volunteer, you're on the lowest low of, like, the totem pole. Like, when you talk to people every day and you get to be that moment to represent a campaign, to kind of represent something that someone can, like, believe in, that's a really powerful thing. So I think just using those moments and remembering, like, these are the people I'm fighting for. And, like, you know what I mean? Every time you turn on the TV, it's something else. It's always worse. But, to make sure you use those people to keep pushing you forward and celebrate when you have the moments of joy, to make sure you can celebrate those.
Cool. Thank you. And then Mimi.
Yeah, I mean, I think growing up with, the amount of heavy events happening at such a frequent pace that we all have, you can actually get sort of, as I said before, jaded to electoral politics and have seeing it as the solution when it feels like it's all just so, like, broken, and it can be hard to, like, see it as the solution when it feels like it's so much of the problem. But a specific moment that really revolves around that issue of violence, like, sort of restored my faith in electoral politics in a way, was back in 2016 after the Pulse shooting. John Lewis organized Democrats and had a sit-in on the House floor protesting the GOP holding back gun control laws and votes on those common sense gun control laws. It was one of those moments where I just felt like it was so refreshing to see people care and people in government care, and not just go politics as usual about it, and actually stand up together and say, we're not moving until you do something about this. And, getting to work with the organizations I have, you talk to politicians and it's very clear who cares and who doesn't, and who has the experience in their community to understand these issues and who doesn't. And, turning a blind eye to the power electoral politics have, in a way I feel like makes me feel as complicit as those politicians who turn a blind eye to these issues that affect us. So I'd rather, work for these people who I care and I know really see the communities they're running to elect, than just be like, oh, it's politics, it's that way, and give up on it.
Cool. And then, you talking about politicians who care, I think I'm gonna skip ahead to one of my questions that was at the end. Who are politicians that you really admire, or and I guess I'll put in a two-part question. Who are some politicians you admire that you feel like who do care, and who are candidates, whether it be this cycle or a previous cycle, who you admire, who you believe that really care? I know in Philly, you guys have a really cool DA. He had endorsed Senator Warren, so truthfully, that's how I got to learn about him. But he's a great DA. But I'm sure there's a lot of local and state candidates in Pennsylvania that are out there. But maybe it's someone outside of Pennsylvania. So I'd love to know, and I'll start off with you, Mimi, who's an elected that you really admire? And then the second part of that is who's a candidate that you really admire?
Yeah, we're lucky here in Pennsylvania. We have like a really great bench in our state legislature. The first candidate I thought of is in our state house. We have Jennifer O'Mara, who won back in 2018. She won by 531 votes, which is such a small amount. I mean, it was a bit of like a miracle election, but she's definitely going to re-election. I believe in her. But it's really exciting for me to see an unapologetic progressive in Pennsylvania, especially in such a competitive district, who knows it's a competitive district, but, you know, is not willing to compromise their values and still fights for big, bold solutions and doesn't, you know, mince words or go with the politics as usual ideas of what, you know, you should run on in Pennsylvania, and runs on what they truly believe in. So Jennifer O'Mara, really inspired by her. I'm excited to see her get reelected to the state house. And a current candidate is Nina Ahmad, who's running for Auditor General here in Pennsylvania. When she wins, she'll be the first of color elected statewide in Pennsylvania, which is really exciting. You know, Pennsylvania politics are very white and very male. So it's exciting to get, you know, some new change and some new, you know, with a position like Auditor General. A lot of people don't really know what that is or what it does. And she's been really adamant on showing the full power that office can have and saying, you know, the Auditor General has power over budgets. You know, we can talk about issues of racial justice and making sure we're investing in our communities in the office of Auditor General. So bringing a new perspective to that office. Nina Ahmad, really excited to see her win as well.
Cool. Krissie, same two questions for you.
Yeah, so an elected official that I recently started being more interested in, and sorry, I just realized I was like lagging. An elected official that I really admire is Lena Hidalgo. She's the Harris County judge. I'm sure us Texans and even Pennsylvanians know her. Why I really admire her and have started looking up to her even more recently is because she is so young. She's a Latina. I really see myself in her. And not only that, but her response to the COVID pandemic, you know, there was a lot of backlash that she got with a lot of the decisions that she made. And through all that, she stood strong on her choices, and she did what was right for her constituency. So yeah, I really admire her, and I think that my candidate is not going to come as a surprise to anybody. My congressional house candidate, Candace Valenzuela, I admire her so much. Growing up in this area, in Tarrant County especially, all I saw ever was white male politicians. To finally see a woman of color that really has a chance at becoming my congresswoman, somebody that looks like me, and somebody that I am able to reach out to personally, like that is insane to me. So yeah, and I believe that her story really resonates with the people of TX24. I know that a lot of, you know, mine and her stories, like we share some similarities, so that's why I really look up to her, and I'm really excited to call her congresswoman come January.
Cool. Yeah, I actually, before we get to Sydney and Zach, I've been following Nina Ahmad's race. Because I believe she had run for office before in Pennsylvania, and she's a Muslim Bengali, and she had run in, I want to say 2018 for Congress. Is that right?
She ran for lieutenant governor. There was
she ran for lieutenant governor. Okay.
She was running for Congress. Yep.
Yeah. So super excited to hope, I don't know Pennsylvania politics at all, but I'm hoping she gets a W on election night. And then I remember I lived in Harris County. I was going to grad school at the time, and I met Lena or Judge Hidalgo quite a few times, and I think it's amazing. I guess, honestly, coming out of nowhere. I mean, I used to go to events with Democrats, and they would tell me they're going to vote for Ed Emmett, and who was the incumbent at the time, a Republican incumbent, and Lena ended up winning, and she thinks she's done an amazing job, especially with poor leadership at the top in Texas with Governor Abbott. I think Judge Hidalgo's done an amazing job. Sydney, same questions for you.
Yeah, so both loved Mimi and Krissia's answers as well. And kind of in the same vein as Mimi's answer, keeping it in the PA state legislature, the current elected, that was someone I really look up to, is Katie Moon for Senate District 44. She flipped a district by being, unafraidly progressive and herself, like, to her core. Like, a lot of people say, like, they'll fight for the people they're running to represent, but, like, Katie Moon will literally fight for the people she's running to represent. Recently, since she was elected, there was, like, a spillage into the marsh, like, creek, and she went in, like, she got a canoe, she went in to assess the damage. Like, she doesn't, play by the rule book. There's kind of this idea of kind of what you have to, a candidate you have to be to win in Pennsylvania, but she doesn't fit those boxes. She's not afraid to, like, break up the boys club. She'll wear her bright pink suits and she'll, scream on top of everyone else until her voice is heard in the best way possible. And, she's someone I really look up to and admire, and I admire her passion and courage and persistence and her, ability to be honestly and authentically herself, and that really translates for the people she represents.
Cool. And Zach?
Well, I knew Krissia and I would have very similar answers. I wonder why. Anyway, I always look up to Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez. I really think of her as an honorary member of Generation Z, our generation. And I don't say that just because I'm a progressive and identify with a lot of her talking points, but she just has such a relatable approach, from Instagram lives to just like direct to camera communicating always. She like explains DC for those of us who have ever been there, who never really understand it. So I look up to AOC and always will. I look forward to her being in office for many decades to come as well. And I'm going to refrain from naming Julie for my candidate I look up to this cycle, because this is not a 4.5-hour conversation, and I will go on for that long. But I really do also look up to Candace Valenzuela up north in Texas 24 in DFW. She also has really a similar upbringing to Julie, in that she experienced homelessness as in the developmental stages, meaning adolescence, really, the hardest time to be homeless. So despite all odds, she's overcome it all, and she's honestly poised to be the first Afro-Latina representing us in the House of Representatives. So it's going to be a really exciting January.
I know you don't want to spend 4.5 hours talking, but I'd love to know more about the work that you've been doing on Julie's campaign. With 22 days away until election, if there's folks who are listening who are not a part of the campaign or who might not know about Julie Oliver, what's your quick pitch on what's going, the temperature of the race and what folks can do to make sure that Julie crosses the finish line?
Oh, absolutely. Well, Texas 25 is one of those 10 districts on the D-Trip battlefield, one of the 8 on the red to blue list here in the Lone Star State. It has recently come online in the public sphere as one of the most winnable in the country. It's my home district. I'm 2 blocks south of a neighboring district and 3 blocks south of another district. So we are incredibly gerrymandered, but organizing all 13 counties, and have been for quite honestly 22 months, it feels like, since April of 2019. And I've been so fortunate to be welcomed onto the team as a staffer by Julie, by her husband, and more recently, since the pandemic, welcomed onto the finance teams by our director, Sydney Hollingsworth. And honestly, being a young person, social media comes very naturally. So I've had a great time promoting events on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, as well as doing field work as a field organizer. So I do it all. I tell people like, oh, I'm always on, and they don't believe me, but like, yeah, like I honestly am always on my computer. But I've had a really great time trying to engage the UT campus, which is within the district. And just to touch on Julie a bit, she has an incredible life story as well. Like I mentioned, she was homeless as a teenager, was pregnant at age 17, and got herself through college through the grace of Pell Grants, is an accountant, is an attorney, poised to be the very first congressman of Texas 25. What's so interesting here is that so many of these districts have never had female representatives. So this year is a great opportunity in many ways. And I look up to her. Like I said, I can talk about her for hours. I see her every day, and it's always just so refreshing to hear her speak. And I'm looking forward to having her perspective in office as well, as we need, we need real working class people representing us. They really get it.
Cool. Thanks, Zach. And you did all that in less than 4.5 hours. So bravo. Krissia, would love to know more about the coordinated campaign. And I guess just all the work that's being done in Travis County and how folks can also go out and help with that.
Yeah, so right now the Travis County Democratic Party's coordinated campaign is really focusing on every single Democratic candidate. We go out and lit drop every day of the week. We have canvassers out there. And on weekends we have volunteers, so that's like double the energy on the ground. We are currently lit dropping for whether it's like Julie or Lloyd Doggett. But like our lit includes every single Democratic candidate up and down the ballot, all the way down to judges. Okay, I'm gonna butcher her name. It's Darlene Burr. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, she's in Travis County. So yeah, we're focusing on every single down ballot Democrat, and yeah, really excited to elect Democrats up and down the ballot however I can. Especially, I know that canvassing face to face isn't really a thing that's able to happen right now. So lit dropping and getting outside is so refreshing.
Yeah, I volunteered with Travis County to do lit drops around UT in West Campus, so that was really nice. And then Sydney and Mimi, I know y'all aren't in Texas, but Pennsylvania is going to be a very important state. It is an important state regardless, but an extremely important state. In 22 days, how can folks in Texas or wherever folks might be listening from, get tuned into Pennsylvania and make sure that Pennsylvania goes Biden's way? And we could kick it off with either or. So let's do Sydney, since I think you unmuted first.
Oh, wow. The pressure's on now. Okay. So, we're in the same boat with you guys, battle swing states. We got to fight for it. So if you look up Back to Blue and go to their Mobilize page, there's a ton of events where you can text bank, phone bank from anywhere in the country. And then on a side note, Mimi and I are both fellows for Amanda for PA. You can find her on Twitter, Facebook, whatever. And she's running for state senate in our district. We live in a, pretty blue district. But what's so unique about her campaign is that she beat a long-term incumbent running on the idea of bringing integrity and true representation back to our district, as someone who had an elected official who was not living up to the principles that we, elected him to serve by. So you can support her in that way as well, and by mobilizing the more bluer parts of Pennsylvania and working to support the more purple and red, we'll get everyone out there and active and ready to the polls, and hopefully, swing this district or swing our state to Biden. Mimi, I'm sure you can embellish that.
Yeah, Mimi, if you want to add on anything to that.
Yeah, so what she said, Pennsylvania is the keystone state. It's also the keystone in this election. It's really a deciding way. It's the path to the White House. It's Biden's home state, so there's a lot of pride here for Biden specifically. But we have an incredible bench up and down the ballot across the whole state who are all, there's a really great sense of community between all the candidates and their teams. So it's all about uplifting each. And it's open to volunteers from anywhere. It was won by 0.7% in 2016. That is such a small percentage of voters. So really make up the difference. And small plug, if people here from Pennsylvania are watching, you can go to votespa.com to check out a registration, because the deadline for that is next week. So make sure you are doing that as soon as possible.
Cool. Thank you. And now just going back to, student activism and what's important for students, what are top priorities for students this election cycle? And I'd love to kick it off with Zach.
Yeah, well, students want and need to feel like they're being listened to. As the Halperns have touched on before, it's really easy to feel despondent to politics. So feeling like you even just have a seat at the table, let alone actually having a seat at the table, is super critical. So every time someone under 30 gets elected, it feels kind of like a win. nothing more inspiring, honestly, than seeing someone not your age, but within a decade, getting elected is really monumental. But policy-wise, student debt cancellation is going to be probably number 1 or 2, and the decarbonization of our incredibly wasteful economy also takes center stage. You can look no further than the Sunrise Movement to see where the attention really lies among young people and who are wanting to organize to elect over other candidates.
Cool. Krissia, same question. What are some top priorities for students this election cycle?
I think that one of the top priorities that I have heard is climate change. I think Zach touched on that a bit. There's a lot of things that the current elected officials that we have, they're a little bit older. So it's like, okay, well, if this doesn't really impact us, like, why should we focus on it? I think that right now, young voters are really, I think that they need somebody like young representatives in Congress to like actually listen to us and like care about these issues. So I think that representation is really, really important. I think that's something that a lot of young voters are going to be focusing on this time around, because we do have let's be honest, we have an old white man at the top of the ticket, but we have a lot of really great down ballot candidates that they can directly reach out to, and I think that that's really important, is having that representation.
Cool. And then Mimi.
Yeah, something I hear a lot talking to young voters is this concern about, my vote doesn't matter. And before we get to, climate change and student loan debt and all these other really critical issues, I think we have to make sure people know their votes matter. So something I'm always surprised about actually is how, people get excited about, campaign finance reform, overturning Citizens United, passing a Voting Rights Act, talking about things like abolishing the Electoral College, and reforming our courts, things that will lead to a more direct democracy and instill more comfort in government, and make sure people know that their votes really count, and beyond physical representation or anything like that, they literally know that they're being represented through their vote at the least. So restoring integrity in our government is something that resonates with a lot of young voters.
Cool. And then Sydney, same question. And I'm going to add another question because Mimi just took one of my next questions. What do you tell voters what do you tell, students, folks your age, when they say, my vote doesn't count, why vote, and all that stuff?
Yeah, so I echo everything that was just said. And one of the key issues, I think, especially now, is talking about racial justice. I get emotional seeing how many people, when I look at my classmates, how many people took action. We're out here this summer protesting, and I think that's so important and a really key issue that people are voting on. And it's important to also explain to people how the candidates are voting on, especially down ballot candidates, can translate to racial justice and social justice and all those things. And Mimi touched on this earlier, Nina Ahmad talking about how she can use her power in the office to, invest in community and all those things. So I think educating people on what elected officials can do in office, and then also talking about, again, as Mimi mentioned, people like Jen O'Mara, who won by 500 votes, who won by 504 votes. And there was recently a campaign in Philadelphia that put up posters that said, if you vote, your vote will cancel out one racist. So it's maybe not, I wouldn't be maybe that direct, but it's very true. And the reality is, if you mobilize these young people, explaining to them the real power of their vote and, what that means to have a stake at the table.
And then Zach and Krissia, and I guess we could start off with Zach. What do you tell folks when they say that, why vote, or, my vote doesn't matter?
Sure. Well, unfortunately, Twitter likes to think that young people don't care about policy, which is the furthest from the truth. So honestly, just speaking policy with students is the best mechanism for convincing people to actually go stand in that 3-hour line to go vote. And that's why we see progressives like Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders do so well in primaries with young people because we care about policy. We care about getting Medicare for everyone and getting a Green New Deal so we don't, perish from climate change in 100 years, that sort of thing. So honestly, policy, I think, is the best approach. Candidates who don't shy away from making a very drawn line in the sand of where they stand do better, and I admire them the most. So yeah, just taking it directly to young people, we're not dumb. We understand. We can at least try to understand. So just being direct is probably the best way to convince people to get to the polls and to stay engaged.
Cool. And then Krissia, same question. What do you tell folks, or what do you do in situations where folks are like, my vote doesn't matter, or why vote?
Yeah, I think that I'm gonna echo kind of what Zach said about Twitter. I think that the sentiment shared on Twitter is that young folks do not care about policy, and like he said, that is really, really far from the truth. I think also another thing that I think maybe Sydney or Mimi touched on was the importance of these races. You mentioned Nina Ahmad, how she was saying, how her office impacts young voters directly. And I think that one instance that I've seen in Travis County is Jose Garza running for district attorney. Bernie Sanders is placing a lot of emphasis on his race. And I think that is really, really important because, we all know that Bernie is a lot of college students, a progressive icon. And so, for him to be placing emphasis on an office that is, usually overlooked and, young voters don't really care about it, I think that that's really, really important. So I'm really glad that he's doing that. And I think that we need to see a lot more of that.
Cool. Thank you. And then I know, and I'm going to keep it with you, Krissia, on this question. I know with this McConnell versus Justice rally, there's obviously a lot of mobilizing of the youth. So what methods have you used to get students activated for this current election? And like I said, Krissia, we'll kick it off with you.
So I think that one of the methods that is really, really important is peer-to-peer organizing. I think that anybody here will confirm that whenever an older volunteer or an older organizer talks to a college voter, it's like, okay, well, why should I listen to you? Your issues aren't my issues. But whenever I'm talking to another college-aged voter, it's like, oh, well, you can relate more, and then that connection is easier to spark, and that interaction will stick with them because it's like, oh, you're one of my peers. We may have a class together, or I may see you around campus. We're in the same clubs. We can relate in those ways. And so I think that peer-to-peer organizing is really, really important.
Cool. Zach?
Absolutely what Krissia said. Excuse me, I have a bug in me or something. Well, shout out to the relational organizer on Team Julie, Jason Taper, as we've prioritized that since, honestly, since the pandemic began, what I was at 3.5 years ago. But I'm the quote voting friend. I think everyone on the call is the quote voting friend when it comes to campus, but also just life, where we're the person that people reach out to when they're like, how do I register to vote? You're the only person who knows, that sort of thing. So like Krissia touched on, just being the advocate among your own people, and that's typically by age, is super critical. And there's no better way to directly engage students and young people than other students and young people.
Cool. Mimi.
Yeah, so something with young people that I think is important to keep in mind is we're here because we make time for politics. We don't just have spare time to, go knock doors for hours. We make time. So you have to understand that a lot of, the people you're talking to have a lot of prior commitments and come in knowing that and, sort of adjust your pitch to address that. So meeting people where they're at is something that I think is really important with organizing young people. If you have a college high school Dems chapter, you should be working with the football team and science club and all these groups that are usually, not doing the organizing or the voting. We, before COVID times, obviously, we set up voter registration booths at our high school's football team or games. And that's an effective way to say, hey, these are the people who we might not not naturally have a reach to as, you know, a Democratic group. But it's cool to, you know, meet, like I said, meet people where they're at and like sort of make that time for them. You know, if they're not going to make that time themselves, help them carve that time out and say, hey, we're here, whether you like it or not, come register to vote. But also with Enough Greater Philadelphia, we have been for weeks now doing a weekly program called Take Action, where we've established an email list. You can sign up. You can go to enough_GP on any social media. We're emailing out every week a new challenge of a way to get involved in this upcoming election. And some are as simple as sharing, you know, your Instagram story, a way to help people register to vote. And some are going out and knocking doors and dropping lit. So we're really working to help people, you know, learn how to, you know, best incorporate time for politics in their schedules and meet people where they're at, and just, you know, being flexible and touching the base with people on the issues they care about and in their own communities.
Cool, thank you. And I feel like you keep taking one of my next questions, but I'm going to wait for this question after I hear from Sydney. So yeah, Sydney, how, you know, what methods have you gone by to get folks mobilized and energized?
Yeah, so kind of to go further on Mimi's question, one of the biggest kind of things that has come up in our work is kind of this education gap, where there are so many young people who want to get involved. They want to register to vote. They care about who's fighting for them. But those processes are so complicated and so difficult. And it's hard. Like, you know who your president is, but if you talk to like most people, they don't know who their closest contact is in government. So a huge chunk of the work we've been doing in Enough Greater Philadelphia is working to reach out to students through social media, through the peer-to-peer contact like Zach and Krissia talked about, and focusing on education. Like, how do we make talking about registering to vote as accessible as possible? Like, we made little scan, like QR codes thing for people to make their lock screen, so when they grow the protest, they can register people to vote. We made graphics about, like, a couple of weeks ago, there was a big thing about naked ballots in Pennsylvania being a problem. If your ballot isn't in the secret seal envelope, like, it won't be counted. And that's a really complicated thing to talk about. It's like a 7-step process. So making sure that's an accessible information that can be shared digitally, that people understand and are willing to, you know, put on their stories and send to their friends in ways that they can digest.
Cool, thank you. And then, like I said, Mimi had jumped ahead to my next question. But how do you guys balance being a student and also just being involved in activism and campaigns and all that? Like, I remember when I was in undergrad, you know, I think for me it was just like making sure I don't fail out of UT, and that I had you know, a ticket to the next football game. And I really do applaud all of y'all for taking such a lead and leadership role within your age group and in your respective states and cities, and you know, making sure people are mobilized and energized and educated on the issues. But how do you guys balance it all? So Zach, we'll kick it off with you.
Well, yeah, deciding between work and school is a very easy decision. Work is more critical. but honestly, in all seriousness, it's incredibly common that people will ask, well, how are you like here and there? And it's like, well, I'd rather be here, you know, talking to voters than sitting in class. I know my friends on the call feel the same, but I do want to mention that there is a really great overlap, especially since the pandemic, to do it at the same time. And that can even just be like, you know, dropping in the Zoom chat while you're in school. You can also be working by, you know, getting people registered to vote online, that sort of thing. So on-campus organizing is the great example of the blending of work and school, and we don't have enough hours in the day to do both full time. But activating fellow students kind of just falls under that umbrella of wearing the work and student hat simultaneously.
Cool, thank you. Krissia, same question.
Gosh, yeah. I feel like there's never gonna be like a perfect balance. We're always gonna have to like sacrifice one thing or another. But like Mimi said, it's like we make this time to do this work because it's like, you know, priorities. But kind of to what Zach was saying, I know it sounds like really, really bad to be like, oh, like work comes first before school. And it's like really bad. Like for like, I know my mom's probably watching and she probably is like, what? But like really the hands-on experience, like with organizing, that's really what matters, because that's what you're going to be doing post college. So it's like talking to voters, making these connections, not only professionally, but like personally, making a little organizer friends. I think that's all really, really important. And so yeah, it's really hard to find the balance, but I think that both can be beneficial to you in some way.
Thank you. Sydney, same question.
Yeah, I am not the person to answer this question in full disclosure. I know my family probably watching the Facebook Live is laughing right now, but it is a very difficult decision to make at times. And I'm lucky, like for the people that I do work for, they are very understanding, but it also is part of being a young person in this is fighting so hard to be taken seriously and to be respected kind of when you're in these bigger rooms. So then to have to say like, oh guys, I can't make the meeting, like sorry, but English class at 11:30, like that is always kind of like a, it sucks. But I guess kind of one of the things you can say is like, if I make this time for myself and my education, like what can I do with this to go further to help more people? Like Mimi and I do weekly phone bank trainings for the Pennsylvania Democratic Party, and we had to, skip the last one to take the SAT, and like it's painful because I know like there are always more calls that can be made, always more people that can be trained, but it's you have to take that time to yourself to also see like with this, what can you do ultimately to move to that next level and to help more people. So that's kind of how I can justify it for myself.
Cool, thank you. And then Mimi.
So echo what Sydney said, but like I was saying before, if you care about anything enough, you'll make time for it. I'm thinking back to pre-COVID when we were in school in person still, and I remember I was phoning while I was eating lunch at school for a state Senate candidate, and by the end of lunch, I had our whole lunch table making calls. Making the time and bringing as many people in while you're there. I try to incorporate it into, my life and personal life as much as I can, which might not be, the best thing, but I really care about this work like everyone else here does. It's nice to get to, see the intersections of those when you can. And, even in school assignments, I try to talk about the things I care about as much as possible. If I can get like a sort of open-ended essay topic, I'll end up talking about the race I'm working in. Actually, Amanda, how I got connected with Amanda Capoletti's campaign, who Cindy and I are working for, was from a journalism class project. I wrote an article about her race, and that's when I first got involved in her campaign. So there's a lot of cool overlap that you can find if you, think about it, make it work.
Yeah, that's true. And I applaud you for organizing everywhere. When I was, I guess once again, pre-COVID, anytime I would come back from working on the Warren campaign in South Carolina to Texas, I'd always be wearing like a t-shirt or a sweatshirt or a hat or whatnot. And if anyone asked anything about the campaign, like I would just like get on my phone and get their information and like get them plugged in from whatever state or city they were in to make phone calls, knock on doors, or go to an event. So I applaud you for organizing at a lunch table. So I guess we're getting close to time, but I'd love to know, kind of getting away from activism and stuff you do. What are your thoughts on this current election cycle? It seems like it started a billion years ago. At a time, there were like 80 Dems running for the seat. Then Biden got it at the top, and just I guess everything that's happened this election cycle with the pandemic, with everything with George Floyd's murder, and just the light being shown on on police brutality and what a lot of brown and black folks go through, on a daily basis. How has this 2020 cycle, and I believe all of you guys will be voting for the first time in 2020, right?
Yeah.
Correct. So how has the 2020 cycle been, and how do you think it's going to end? Like what does election day, or November 4th, I guess, the day after election, how do you think that looks like? And we'll start off with Zach.
Oh wow, that's every dream and nightmare for the past 2 years. Well, I really don't know how it's going to go. I have probably more optimism and hope than other people, but I think we're gonna all come together in these next 3 weeks more than we ever have before, and I'm really looking forward to early voting starting tomorrow. In Texas, as so many people have been waiting 48 months for this moment. I was joking on Twitter that this is like a little election night eve party, but I'm looking forward to it. I think we're going to see some really great change in some places where we're not going to expect some really great change. But really, I'm doing what I can with my time, and I know everyone else is as well. And it's going to be great no matter what.
Cool, thank you. Krissie, same question.
Yeah, wow, whenever you ask about like the day after, it's like I can't even imagine a life after the election, and I'm sure y'all can't either. Because leading up to this, it's been like nonstop, like well, there was the primary, and then there was a runoff, and then there was like now we're here. And so it's been like nonstop work, but overall, I know that there's going to be like at least one very like great progressive candidate that is going to be elected on November 3rd. And so, whether that be like on a local level, or a congressional candidate, or whether the Biden-Harris ticket wins, and fingers crossed that they do, I know that there's going to be at least one great win to come out of it. So I'm excited to see that. Yeah, I don't know. It's just really, really hard to put words together for that, because it's like, what? That's going to happen soon.
Yeah, true. Yeah, 22 days. Sydney, same question.
I mean, that's such a huge question, but I've gone on, a journey this primary. I started as, a huge Elizabeth Warren supporter, and while that obviously didn't pan out, I'm so glad I did have that opportunity, because I think it kind of gave me a permission to like dream big again and to be able to have these hopes. Like, I'd rather be hopeful and give it my all and have my heart broken than never try at all. And I think kind of the primary that Mimi and I touched on with the campaign we work for, or our fellows for, that kind of reinstated my like trust and belief like in my neighborhood and in my community, and the fact that when given the chance, like I really do believe that people will, fight for the person that they think represents them and their community, and who will do good. So, fingers crossed for Biden-Harris, and, the stakes could not be higher. The differences between Biden and Trump could not be further. I had like a family member who was sick with Corona, and thankfully they've, recovered. But I know that Biden and Kamala will fight for my family like their own, while Trump is actively endangering the lives of others for his own personal gain. So, when the differences are so stark, the importance of this election could not be greater. So again, for any PA folks here, please go to votespa.com. Make sure you're registered in the next couple of days. And that's, what I have to say about that.
Cool. Thank you. And then Mimi.
Yeah, so I'm feeling really optimistic, which I'm always scared to say, because I feel like people can think that's a naive thing to say, you're optimistic. But it's really based on what I'm seeing. Even if you go most like rural counties here in Pennsylvania, there's big farmers for Biden-Harris on in the middle of a cornfield. That was not there in 2016. There's definitely a lot of movement that I have reason to feel optimistic, and all of us do. But that doesn't mean, stop working. It should inspire you to work harder, not just taking it for granted, seeing the poll numbers and going with it. But I feel really good. And, in my own community, I've seen friends of mine, writing essays and making presentations to try to convince their parents to vote for Biden and Democrats down the ballot as well. So, you know, my community in Pennsylvania, in the country, I hope, is really activated in a way I haven't seen in my lifetime that gives me a lot of hope for these upcoming results. And, you know, since the beginning of the primary, which does not even feel like real anymore, you look back at those primary debates and it feels like such a far off world. But from that beginning, my goal was just that day after the election to feel like I did everything I could. And I feel like no matter what the results are, I will feel like I did everything I could. And people watching, I encourage you to volunteer to the point where you feel the same way. So I think I did all the work I could, feeling good. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you. Well, for anyone from Pennsylvania, it's votepa.com, right?
Yeah, votes with an S. Though.
Oh, okay. Votes with an S. Votespa.com. And then anyone in Texas, voting starts tomorrow and it goes until October 30th. Polls are open from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And then election day is November 3rd. I want to thank all of y'all for being on. I admire you guys so much and even look up to you guys and all the great work that you guys are doing. Just kind of how you guys have touched on, like, you know, seeing something that's going great and it pushing you to do more, like just seeing y'all doing the work that you guys are doing, it pushes me to want to do more and make sure that the feeling of 2016 is never repeated again. And we have this horrible person who doesn't care for anyone other than himself to be out of office and for us to work towards a better, more equitable country. So thank you guys so much for being on. And really enjoyed the conversation. And I look forward to all the great work from the McConnell versus Justice rally, and looking forward to all the great work that Zach, you're going to do with Julie's campaign, and Krissia, you're going to do with the Travis County Dems. And I will talk to you guys later.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.